start the press conference devoted to presentation of the public opinion of Donbas population, which was held in July 2017. This is part of the opinion poll in Donbas and Donetsk and Luhansk regions. This is part of our project, which is supported by the UK embassy to Ukraine. This is a big project devoted to reintegration of Donbas, to studies of the opinion poll, and strengthening of the self-governance of the regional people. We had the opportunity to deliver press conferences here in Ukrainian Crisis Media Center for several times in different topics about attitude to parties, about visa-free regime, about other different topics, about perception of decommunization, and everywhere we used regional approach, but usually Donbas was a separate part of our opinion polls because it was quite different from other regions of Ukraine. But in the past, we had a sample of 250, 270 people, while now we had 140 respondents from Donbas. That's why we had joined Donbas with the East in general, but nevertheless, Donbas has an important position in formation of public opinion, and we're seeing that 140 respondents is a good sample, representative sample, which might reflect its specificities against other regions, and in survey of special topics. So decentralization. Decentralization is an important reform which has a chance to become successful among big number of non-successful reforms. All the residents of Ukraine believe that decentralization is a positive process, and they support strengthening the extension of powers and the strengthening of local self-governments. But when we ask the question, about local budgets, whether the residents feel that their personal income had grown jointly alongside with the growth of local budget. And here, Donbas region and the whole Ukraine answered very similarly. Around Ukraine as a whole, there were 16 yes and 16 no. In Donbas, 21 said positively and 21 responded negatively. Although in Luhansk Oblast, the situation is a bit better. While 28 said yes, 21 in Donetsk Oblast said yes, and equally 19 and 24% said that the changes were negative. I believe that this reflects a situation that in some places it's for the better, in some places it's for the worse, but the average is something in between. Then the question whether the power in your local council is able to cope with the new powers. In all the places, there are strong doubts in the capacity of local authorities. And again, in Donetsk region, the doubts are higher. Although in Lugansk Oblast, there is big part of those, big share of those who appeared unable to answer the question. Also, there are big doubts about opportunities which will rise with this. In Lugansk Oblast, 48% expect to have expect for new opportunities. People will have more chances to influence the governance. But again, big part of people was unable to answer this question. In Donetsk Oblast, there is approximately equal number of optimists. But there is a bigger part of negative predictors, 29%. Probably local people can more or less adequately assess the capacity of local authorities, and while in Donetsk region there is more pessimism than in Lugansk Oblast, there is more uncertainty. Then the question about better solutions to the local issues, local problems. Some people said that and again, both regions had shown more or less equal assessment, and actually the responses prove that some problems are tackled, but finally solutions are not found. In further, we will try to understand more about the volume of effort contributed into solution and to what extent the solutions are not found. Then the question about priorities, which top priorities, top problems for solution. And here the bigger attention is given to economy, to economic issues. I recollect that back in 2015, we carried out similar research about problems which are seen by people. This was the economy, revival of industrial enterprises and revival of jobs, more than 60%, and also social payments, raising wages in pensions and in salaries. But a revival of enterprises and jobs are seen then the as bigger priority than raising social payments. People adequately understand that without the raise of production, development won't be possible. Then revival of roads and social infrastructure. In Luhansk, the need is more important. In Donetsk, some years ago, that problem was the top priority, and we assume that the situation is getting better. Then about Medicare. In Donetsk Oblast, 29% people believe that anti-corruption work should be strengthened and continued. But when we ask the question what problems had been resolved more or less successfully, we got much more modest answers. Of course, revival of ruined infrastructure is being restored and reconstructed. Also, reconstruction of ruined housing. But about revival of enterprises, only 6% in Luhansk Oblast and less than 1% in Luhansk Oblast. Assistance to people willing to become self-employed people, SMEs. In Luhansk, less than 1% respondents answered yes. In Donetsk, less than 2%. This is a big and considerable problem. Local people who work there, they are better familiar with the situation. Non-resolved problems are as follows. Half of all the problems remain unresolved. So half of respondents mentioned that no problems were resolved, which means that people either do not know, and maybe the communication is very weak. Then we asked about priorities for spending money from a local budget. And again, the top priorities: stimulating production, revival of enterprises, 62 and 56%. Raise in the social payments, and 22 again and 26%. 36. Improvement of health care, 25 and 25 and 27. Overhaul and strengthening the infrastructure is supported by 56 and 28% by respondents. This is bigger number than in Ukraine in average. Then protection of rights. Protection of rights is a serious issue, and we invited civic activists, and only 32 and 37% of people believe that their rights are protected. But when we asked what rights should be protected, this was again the right to labor. As for social protection, in Lugansk Oblast, 34% of people believe that their social rights are violated, while in Donetsk, only 15% of respondents. Then there was a question about the ways to overcome armed conflict and peacemaking process in Donbas. And against the rest of Ukrainian territory, local population believes that compromise should be reached with anybody about anything. In Luhansk, 38% and 44% in Donetsk Oblast believes that compromise is possible. But in Luhansk Oblast, 34% believes that compromise is possible, but not any compromise, and 39% in Donetsk Oblast believes that compromise is possible, but not at any price. Then we asked people what solutions might be approved for future peace in Donbas. And here in this question, Donbas is similar to the rest of Ukraine. Successful reconstruction of peaceful life in all the territory of Ukraine, forcing Russia to stop aggression in Donbas, was less supported in Donbas. Only 12% in Luhansk believe that this is possible, and only 33% in Donetsk Oblast think this is possible to force Russia to do something. These are people who are very much interested in reconstruction of peaceful life in this territory. That's why they have strong position in this respect. Then the question, well, whether LPR or DPR territories should be separated from Ukrainian territory is the least supported in Ukrainian Donbas, only 4 and 10%. Because they have friends and relatives. Almost half of residents in Donetsk and Luhansk, they have friends and relatives in the occupied territories, and they maintain contacts. In Luhansk Oblast, they 58% maintain regular communication, and Donetsk 22% maintain regular communication with occupied territories, with their friends in occupied territories. So the contacts exist. For many people, military conflict in Donbas has not improved, has not influenced communication with relatives. And next time we will discuss the channels of communication. And the biggest share of trust is laid upon relatives, friends, and family members. As for foreign passports, not so many people have an opportunity to go abroad at this very moment. Only 4% in Luhansk Oblast and 7% in Donetsk Oblast. But in Donetsk Oblast, considerable part, 30%, have old Ukrainian passports, but with Schengen visas, but without Schengen visas. Then we asked a question whether they ever visited Western Europe, and people answered 86% no in Lugansk and 76% no in Donetsk, while 1/3 of Luhansk never visited Russia, and 1/2 of Donetsk Oblast residents never visited Russia. visa regime with Russia is supported very weakly. Only between 10 and 28%, and in other regions of Ukraine it is not also supported. Self-identification of people. Here we see considerable shifts in self-identification. The majority of people perceive themselves as citizens of Ukraine. Back in 2012, 2013, even 2014, their identification was regional, while now their self-identification had changed. Now, interesting language situation. We asked question, what language do you use in your everyday communication? In Luhansk Oblast, where considerable part of people belong to historical region Slobozhanщина, close to Kharkiv, and there 90% use Ukrainian, while in Donetsk Oblast only 3%. But the majority are bilingual. This is 1/3 in both these regions. About integration. Donbas region is very separate in terms of European integration. Only 1/3 thinks we should integrate to Europe, and some people believe we should not join any country, while 17 and 16% still believe that we should go to customs union with Russia. And the NATO issue. Almost 20% of people support Ukrainian alienation to NATO. This is equal to the situation in Ukrainian South. In Donetsk, almost 30% support NATO. In Luhansk Oblast, less than 20%. But back in 2012, there was less than 1% of NATO supporters in Donbas. And now about ratings. When we compare Donetsk and Luhansk Oblast in political terms, I should say that Lugansk is a spare field, political spare field or desert. % ignored all the political forces. 43% did not wish to go to elections. On the one hand, opposition bloc is a leader here. But it is supported by 10% of population and maybe 13% of voters who plan to attend elections. Before 2014, back in 2012, the majority in the region was won by Party of the Regions. But if we won't pay attention to this, this party will become the winner. In Luhansk Oblast, in Donetsk Oblast, the situation is a bit better. And here, the support is given to opposition bloc by 12% of those who plan to vote. The party for life 7%, but Bekeshkina 7%, and radical party 4.9%. Movement of new forces. Petro Poroshenko 4.3%. But this percentage is very weak. Now I'd like to give the floor to our guests. I wanted to describe the situation in general, and now I am ready to give the floor to you, Tetiana.
Thank you, Iryna. First, I would like to thank for this survey. This can be a basis for elaborating of the state policy concerning people who remained in occupation and people who are IDPs, and also people who live in an area that is adjacent to front line, and also this is concerning the occupation of Donbas. And we work according to the principle that we should do things for ourselves, not waiting for someone else to do something for us. We should take our own decisions. And what we see for these 3 years, the decisions that are taken that directly influence quality of life of people who suffer from military aggression in the east. These are not only the people who are in occupation, but also the people who are in the territories that are controlled by the state, those people who are IDPs. The decisions of the power, they do not include the needs of people and their interests and the rights that each citizen of Ukraine has. Here are interesting answers. So whether people believe that their rights are violated, do you feel that your rights are protected? And here, high percentage in Donetsk, 55% in Lugansk Oblast. People do not feel problems with the rights, and here we should be cautious about this indicator, because I believe that people do not understand what rights are mentioned. So people, for a long time, they live in a condition of rigid limitations of rights. And the free movement in the territory of Ukraine, rights 4% in Lugansk Oblast. So this issue, no one would give this answer from other regions. And Lugansk Oblast, there's no even a checkpoint in order to travel to the controlled territory. There is only a pedestrian bridge, and my colleague Oleksandra will tell you more about Lugansk Oblast later. So I would like to repeat, I am thankful for this research. It provides the way how to resolve the problems we face, and they reduce the number of limitations and what should be done for deoccupation, how to resolve the conflict sooner in order that in society there was reconciliation, not confrontation. We should see real needs of people when people say about their concerns. So there is a high percentage of people who speak both languages, and this is also important issue, and Maslow pyramid shows this, that if we didn't resolve the basic needs, the employment, so other issues, they are just lagging behind. So when we search for an answer what to do in Donbas, so first we should ask people, and if people say 62.9% from Lugansk Oblast, they say what they would do, what funds they would allocate. This is the revival of economy and creation of new places of employment. 55.6 in Donetsk, this is less, but still this is the majority. We understand this. And about the revival of infrastructure. This what should be done now, and this should be done not to show to donors. When donors come and they really help Ukraine to overcome the consequences of the conflict, and we show to them some restoration of the bridge or the tower restoration, but we should understand that there are much more that should be done, and people are open about it. If you go to Donetsk Oblast, any taxi driver will show tons of infrastructure facilities that remain unrepaired. And taking into account that this is what is seen by the people who go to their relatives also to get access to their social benefits, pensions, social payments, to get certificates of birth. And this is good that these people go to the controlled territory, and about 15,000 certificates of birth were issued through the court. This is not an administrative procedure. And people go and register the birth of their children. The first thing people see, they see the consequences of ruining. And even some greenery is now covering those areas. That's why people, they see what problems should be addressed first. I would like also to draw attention to the increase of people in the territory of Donetsk Oblast who believe that they are citizens of Ukraine. This is a positive trend. If we remember last year and the results of a public survey, Donbas Analytical Center presented it 32%, and this year this is 40% in your survey, and it confirms the data. So there is identification of people that is really important for us. And one more thing about communication channels. And revival of infrastructure is important, and also communication with people. 50% daily communicate with their relatives. 89% in Donetsk Oblast, they continue to communicate with their relatives, so this is the best channel of communication. So people, they see what is going on here. IDP policy, so this is the main issues to be addressed, and the people in host communities that are in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, they transfer the opinion, and if there should be proper communication through relatives, there should be personal trust among people, and personal trust is higher in Ukraine than trust in institutions. That's why we should focus our attention on this. We started to speak about the rights, and I give the floor to Oleksandra Dvoretska. Good afternoon. I'm grateful for being a participant. So I won't address the research. You have it in your hands and you have the opportunity to look it through. I will tell about my personal experience in working Vostok SOS Foundation. We work at Frontline, and I would like to say about the results. It is interesting to read the research. And we had our own impressions, and we know the situation there. So if we are speaking about social and economic rights and about preservation of communication, we see several problems. We as humanitarian organization, we see such a transformation in the course of the conflict. Some emergency, urgent help was needed, and now they have request for legal consultations, how to register the organization, how to start business, and it cannot be done without proper policy and tax benefits. So working in the Lugansk Oblast, I understand why it is important to people, because Lugansk Oblast was surveyed, and it is more agrarian area, and they brought produce to large cities that now remain outside their territory, and the format of their work is inefficient now, and they want to restore infrastructure, and they want good public transport in order to transport their products to other cities. Severodonetsk does not need such a volume as other big cities. In Stanichno-Lugansk region, there is a lot of enterprises like this, and we should think about it in implementing our state policy, and also why the results are like this. This is connected with reforms. Here in Kiev, we see boys and girls in wonderful police uniform, and this indicators about the rights of people, they are surprising, because the majority of population in Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast, they didn't feel this change. So the old people remained in their positions there, and that's why there is no active mechanism of protecting their rights, and the percentage we have officially as indicators of change about concerning law enforcement bodies. Many people were transferred from Lugansk to Severodonetsk, and the state should find the way to implement reforms at the local level. And there was an interesting request concerning fighting corruption. A lot of funds is provided to restoration of infrastructure, but there is no proposal structure to control this process, or state bodies who are trusted. This network was not built there. So we can think that Donbas residents differ a lot because they want to be integrated to the customs union, and they see themselves as out-of-bloc country. But Stanichno-Lugansk region, where there is a single checkpoint, pedestrian bridge, and people contact their relatives through this bridge and have access to social services. So they do not have Ukrainian TV channels. Ukrainian broadcasting is absent, and there are 10,000 people who do not have such an access. And it is clear that people who went from this occupied territory do not have information And in this regions, the majority of people get information from TV. And they do not watch Ukrainian TV channels, they watch Russian TV channels that is accessible in that region. And the results of the poll shows not only the people, but the policy Ukrainian state implements concerning these territories. And also I would like to draw your attention to the figures concerning politics. The presence of political parties should be evident in order to get political benefits, and the civil and military administrations, there are two of them. The heads are not nominated. In Zolote, there are 8,000 people living, and 5 settlements of miners from 2016 November. There is no head of civil and military cooperation, so they live without city council and without head of civil and military administration, and the distribution of budget is made in Donetsk. So people, they claim that there is no proper public transport, and also the problem with waste, and this builds mistrust. Local authorities and the presidential administration should follow the orders of the president about civil and military administration establishment and the nomination of the heads of these organizations, because Ukrainian power should be present there. Because if Ukrainian politicians are not present on TV and they are not in the bodies of power, then people are guided by some gossips and information that is accessible to them. And I would like to draw the attention to these problems. In order not to say that there is different mentality or political preferences and we cannot do anything because they will remain the same. Maybe I see some ideal results, but I have several things I believe we can gather here next year, and maybe we will see different results. So there is some dynamics, and maybe next time we will show these dynamics. And then the most influential is from 0.3 up to 29 of support of NATO in the Donetsk Oblast. So I'd like to add to what Oleksandra said. So these figures should not be manipulated. So they say 0.3, this is bad, and 30 is good. Maybe it is good. But if someone didn't support NATO, maybe they supported Ukrainian sovereignty and didn't commit any legal actions, so these are just common citizens. We should not discriminate these people concerning this question. So time will come what is better. We will see it. So the figure everyone speaker said about economic issues. These are the main issues for the majority of population. People see success or failure of the state power, local business, and others. And the issues of economy, and this is my personal view, and the Oblast civil and military administration and local power, they want to replace this issue with some ideological issues. And when it is if there are some ideological expectations towards population, and population, they have different requests. So there is a gap. And people have one problem, and they assert that they have different problems, and they want to resolve problems in the heads of people, not in the economy. And in order not to allow such distortions. And about the low percentage of political presence is maybe because Donbas started to be the factor of internal political life and all political parties, even opposition bloc, they shifted to Zaporizhia and they are more active there. And political forces, they do not see any sense to work there. That's why the rating is so low. This is from one side, and from the other, civil and military administrations and their work, this is an important instrument. And for the other side, no one at local level voted for them. And there is some gap between people and administrations there. And before the war it was, and now the same situation. So people are outside of this process.
Now I would like to give the floor to Oleksandr Klyuzhev. I won't repeat the statements of my colleagues. I think that this survey is a good point for central authorities, for the elite of power elite of the regions, and I think that this will allow to get rid of myths that the central authorities had created for themselves. One of the myths is as follows, that Donetsk and Lugansk Oblast are special regions where you may not pay attention to the opinion of people or to manipulate with the situation in these regions in national discourse in future election campaign. I think that this is incorrect approach, and I believe that people in those regions may contribute to the final political fight between political forces, so we should not underestimate them. I also would like to mention Lugansk Oblast and the big number of respondents who appeared unable to make their opinion about different issues. I think this reflects the problem with logistics. This reveals the lack of gravitation points in the region, unlike in neighboring Donetsk region, where they have industrial centers. And there is the issue of communication. I think that this is the worst situation in Lugansk Oblast, and probably this opinion poll reflects this. About the economic issues and about priority of economic issues, this was quite obvious even even before, and the opinion poll only confirmed this top priority of economic issues. But people in those regions do not feel themselves as equal participants of national discourse about the most topical issues. Listening to Iryna, I recollected the discussion of the Donbas position in national priorities. Then I recollected blockade, and I understood that this was the assessment of economic situation and the difficulties of economic situation in Donbas, but we never tried to find good solutions to the economic situation in Donbas. Actually, This proves that we try to treat a disease with a medication which is inappropriate. And of course, people in this territory will resist to such a treatment. So, despite local attempts to find solutions, we should try to change national discourse about these regions and to change a situation when local residents find themselves in opposition to the national discourse about the region. As for political forces, for me, the situation looks like optimistic, although Lugansk region raises my concerns, but nevertheless, this is a true reflection of very weak political representation in the region. But the region tries to put forward some political leaders. But there is also some risk. Strengthening of political competition without decrease in political uncertainty may result in very negative results. Now, it is positive to speculate with limitation of political rights, with the limitation of voting for local authorities. That is famous administrative pressure. And this opportunity is dangerous, potentially is dangerous. Also, there is a threat that the voting rights might be limited due to security considerations, which may ruin political confidence of local population. And we can expect to see this situation in nearest elections. So we need to balance security of voters on the one hand and with the political interests of local population, and to prevent excessive political influence of pro-governmental forces here. Thank you for this survey. And my last point will be about communication inside families separated by the contact line. These figures brightly demonstrate a situation that solution about occupied territories could not be taken in isolation from occupied territories, and or could be taken in isolation with other movements, labor migrant movements, and unfair decision about labor migration. It influences not just occupied or pre-border territories, but other people. I believe that these figures might be very interesting for Donbas activists or activists who expressed opinion about Donbas. because when government officials who are decision makers, they are non-informed about huge number of relatives in the occupied territories, will almost have no time. If you have very, very important question, you may ask it. I would like to mention once again that this survey was part of our broader survey, which comprised also participation in civil society, and later on, we will deliver our findings to NGOs, have a separate discussion with them. We'll formulate our opinion about state policy in these territories, and thus we'll be able to influence further decisions in this area. Thank you very much.